Good evening and welcome to Burlington and Beyond. My name is Adam Sinesi and I'll be guiding you through this thoughtful and lively conversation for the next hour. Thanks for joining us. Tonight we have a very special guest, and our guest tonight is State Rep Candidate Paul Girouard. How you doing tonight, Paul?
I'm doing well.
Thanks for coming in and joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
Happy to have you back.
Yeah.
We're really excited. We're in the final days of the campaign season. This is our last show before the election. So we're very excited to have you here to close out and talk to the viewers.
Yeah, it's great to be here. It's been quite an interesting experience. Talked to a lot of people, and I just learned a lot myself, and listening to people and see what their concerns are. So it's been very interesting and enlightening. So
what are you hearing? What are people concerned about?
I'd say mainly about just taxes and the overreach of government, and just basically Beacon Hill doesn't seem to be listening. So that's the main concern. There's other concerns, but I'd say that's the overall concern you hear from people.
I think that's a sentiment that I've heard also a lot, just over the course of the last several years, but more so recently. Mm-hmm. How do you feel that we've been represented here in Burlington? Do you feel that we're receiving accurate representation up on Beacon Hill?
Well, I would say not. I think if you look at the voting record of our current state rep, it doesn't really align with the values and what we'd like to see. You see a lot of votes that increase taxes, increase fees. You don't see these common sense type votes that would help us all. Like there's just a lot of things if you look at the voting record. Like for instance, requiring 2/3 of majority to raise taxes. I mean, it's a common sense thing. You want to get consensus if you're going to raise taxes. Requiring committee votes to be online so that you can see how committee members vote. These are common sense things that would bring some transparency, and I can't see why you would vote against those type of things and many other things, or reducing the sales and income tax back down to 5%. We voted in 2000 via a ballot question to reduce the income tax back to 5%, and it's taking forever to get it back down there, even though that's what the people had voted for. So these type of things, I don't see where we're getting good representation in these type of votes.
So let's rewind a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background. You live here in Burlington?
Yes, grew up in Burlington, and my wife Mary Ann's from Woburn, and we've settled here, and we've raised 3 boys here, and I work in Burlington as well. My professional background's in the IT field. So I've been at Nokia in Burlington on Wayside Road for over 16 years. I've been in various IT roles there, from IT site manager, IT specialist, basically doing various IT roles, and I've learned a lot. It's been a great experience. So,
what does a job like that help you as you prepare for your role? If you were to go to Beacon Hill, how does that prepare you?
Well, if you're in the role as the IT site manager, you're basically the interface between the global IT group and what's done and rolled out locally. So you're interfacing with the global IT. You're making sure that things are done the way they want them rolled out, conformity across all the different sites. You're also interfacing with all the users, making sure all their needs are met, making sure things don't fall through the cracks. You're making sure things are done on time, meeting all the deadlines, and just everybody's up and working. Of course, if people aren't working, you lose productivity, the company loses money. So, there's a responsibility there to make sure things are rolled out on time, and that everybody's happy and working.
So it sounds like you have a lot of experience being held accountable.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
So besides taxes, what else do you hear on the out on the road in terms of concerns that people have about what they hear on Beacon Hill?
Right. A lot of people are very upset about the immigration situation in Massachusetts. You hear that a lot when you talk to people. They don't understand how we were so lax on immigration as far as checking people's. People can come here illegally and they can sign up for benefits. It's very easy to get benefits. There's very little verification. You can do what's called self-verify. So and there's also situations where you can provide a Social Security number, but whether it's even verified, and there's other situations where you can just sign up for certain benefits without any real documentation. And people are very upset about that because they've worked all their lives, paid into the system. They see people come here and just basically get all the benefits without having paid into the system at all, and they're in some cases not even here legally.
Have there been any votes that came before the last legislature related to immigration and such?
There have been some over the last year or two. There was one that would have required a Social Security number for benefits, and that was voted down. There's been a couple votes having to do with public housing benefits that would have required that you be a citizen or a legal permanent resident. That was also voted down.
So people that are here illegally are allowed to get
Benefits.
residency
That's right.
benefits.
That's right.
How did
And EBT cards.
How
I know
did-
that's been a huge scam, and that
It
also has been,
How
you
did
know,
Rep. Gordon
supposedly they're dealing with it.
vote
But
for?
I believe he's voted, against requiring Social Security number, and he has voted against requiring that you're a citizen or legal permanent resident to get housing benefits.
Why would he do something like that if I'm a resident of Burlington? I'm here legally. I think everyone on this panel is. I hope so, at least. Why, if he's the representative for people in Burlington, Bedford, and Wilmington, would he vote for people that aren't voters and aren't here legally?
I think his constituents would have to ask them. I think it goes along with his ideology. I would say that he feels that everyone should get benefits whether they're here legally or not. So
That's concerning.
it's very concerning. It's part of the reason why I'm getting into this. When I look into his record, and I don't see a voting record that represents most of the people I know. In fact, basically everybody I've talked to. So I think we need to make some change and get somebody in there who will vote in a manner that benefits the people of this district.
So that's why you decided to get in the race? I mean, you're not a career politician.
Absolutely not. No, I definitely, I took a good look at his record and I said, this just isn't right. We need to get somebody in here who's going to represent this district in a better way. So,
Well, I think it sounds like you're onto a lot of the right ideas that I know I can get behind, and I think a lot of the people on this panel, and I think a lot of people that I've talked to around Burlington and Bedford and Wilmington can get behind.
that's the sentiment I'm getting from voters as I talk to them. They just want some, common sense oversight, normal things that we would all do in our everyday finances and things. There's no reason why those things shouldn't be in place on Beacon Hill. So.
Then there's the hidden costs that aren't talked about too often, but the towns and cities are required to pay for the schooling of the illegals as well. That's why it'd be best to put in some sort of legalization program, or at least go back to the requirements that we had in place at one time. Paul, I especially like your background where your opponent tried to put through a high-tech tax, which would not do much for the citizens in this town. We're trying to attract business to the town to put through a high-tech tax where they would now be encouraged to move to another state, up Route 3 or possibly south or possibly even another country these days. So I'm pleased to see that somebody from the high-tech industry is up for election as state rep.
That's right. Yeah, that would have been a disastrous tax. They imposed it without really studying the impact of it. And when they imposed it, it was actually worded so vaguely that even people in the industry, I heard a woman speak who actually, she worked for a local company and she wrote the software contracts for a local large high-tech company. And she was trying to add this tax onto the software contracts she was writing. And it was worded so vaguely that she called the state, the Department of Revenue, looking for guidance how to apply this tax, and they couldn't tell her. It was so vaguely worded. So, in that case, actually she decided herself to run for state rep when she saw the mess that this was going to have. And she says that was what got her involved when she realized they imposed a tax, didn't even know not only the impact it would have, but didn't even know all the specifics of it and how to impose it. So,
or the consequences.
exactly.
So Ken Gordon voted for the raise in the software tax.
Yes, he absolutely did.
Now, I don't understand why he would do such a thing, because I believe something like, you gentlemen would know better than I would as your town meeting members, but 60% of Burlington's revenue comes from residential property taxes. Am I correct?
I think it actually comes from commercial property.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant. 60% comes from commercial, 40% residential.
Correct.
The fact that we have a strong commercial base enables us to have, relatively speaking, when you look across the state, lower residential property taxes. It funds the schools, it funds the roads, it funds the services here in town. Why would they tinker with such a formula, a rep for this district? Never mind the fact that I understand in Bedford the formula is weighted a little bit differently where it's more in favor of residential. Nevertheless, Hanscom Air Force Base contains a lot of technology companies and upstarts.
Well, that whole Hartwell Ave, corridor is all high-tech over there. They would have the same issue that we have, and commercial real estate is a critical funding mechanism for a lot of the towns up and down 128 that have a lot of commercial property. So driving that, and let's face it, we are a high-tech bioscience state for the most part, that those are our two critical industries. And to, throw a tax on that when other states are dying to get these businesses down south or out west, and they're, actively, propagandizing those guys to come down, we'll give you, come down here and we'll give you, no real estate taxes for 10 years, yada, yada, yada. Look what Texas has been doing with California. They're coming up here trying to draw companies away from here all the time. So it was ill thought out, just like the medical tax on the Obamacare bill. These, hidden taxes, underneath the surface do tremendous damage to a lot of the companies that we have in this country. And it's just, poorly thought out and, just a bad concept in terms of how to generate revenues. Because I never seem to get the other side of the coin right, how to control spending. They seem to think that money grows on trees, and I had a conversation with a Democrat over the weekend, and I was just amazed. We were talking about the fire station. I was just amazed at his point of view, saying, well, we still have plenty of room, in our town in terms of the ability to raise funds and taxes and the whole 9 yards. We have, and our bonding levels are that high. And I'm saying, but is that really the point? Because it's still going to be a burden on the taxpayer, even if we do have space there.
Absolutely. You've got people on fixed income, retirees. You don't want to drive them out of town. I mean, you want this to be a place to live where people can afford to live.
Exactly. And since I've been here, the taxes have more than doubled over the time frame. And, I'm not convinced that when you make comparative analysis between different towns, that we're necessarily using all of our funds correctly, and whether we need all the things that we have on our wish list every year. But that's more of a town meeting concept. The other question I want to ask, and this goes back to the legislature, is with the lottery fund supposedly coming back to the towns, and with this new casino going in, what's the game plan there? Are the funds that are going to be generated out of the casino in terms of taxes and stuff, is that going to go into the pot that's part of the lottery and be distributed back to the towns? And is there something in the legislature that could help with that?
I honestly don't know what the plan is for the lottery, for the casino, if that goes through. I don't know how they've determined to do with those funds. I don't know if it just goes into the general fund. I don't know.
Well, the lottery goes in the general fund and never made it back to
lottery's
the
not
towns
supposed
anyways,
to. Lottery's
I know.
supposed to come back to cities and towns.
Just like the bottle bill that's coming up. Well, the fund is going to go directly for all these environmental programs
Right.
that we have that's written into the bill. But guess what? The money goes in the general fund. I don't care what you write in the bill. The funds will go in the general fund and they'll spend it as they see fit.
Well, that's the problem with a lot of things. For instance, the gas tax, the 24 cents per gallon, all that is not going for roads and bridges where
Right.
it should be. So people are under that impression. When I talk to people about the gas tax, I'd say 90% of them agree that it should be overturned, repeal the automatic gas tax. There's a few people who say, well, we need the money for our roads and bridges. But then when I explain to them that all that 24 cents is not going to your roads and bridges, they keep diverting it for other purposes, within about a minute they agree with me and say, yeah, you're right. And I say they're not going to spend it wisely.
How was the law written to begin with? Was it supposed to be earmarked for the roads and bridges?
You're talking
And
about
already it's been diverted?
The
or?
new automatic increase?
Yes. Well, I understand.
Existing 24 cents?
When they raised the gas, before it was 21 cents, and then
Right.
they raised it to 24 cents. Back when it was 21 cents, how much, do we know if it was going to roads and bridges at that point?
I don't know exactly how much, and that's something I'd actually like to get to the bottom of, because I think that's a very important issue. So I hope to get to the bottom of that and find out how much is currently being diverted, how much of that current 24 cents is going to.
Have you looked into it?
Not yet, but I plan on it.
Okay.
My impressions are that laws can be written that say that the money needs to go into this direction,
Yeah.
but it never happens.
Right.
The bottle bill, the funds are supposed to go environmentally.
Correct.
The lottery, the monies are supposed to go back to the cities and towns. The gas tax is supposed to go to roads and buildings.
Right.
But the revenues go in the general fund. And then they just disperse it as they see fit. And the problem is, none of us know really, what
The lack of
expenditures
transparency.
are. Yeah, you never know what's going on. in
And
Beacon
even
Hill,
with the
where funds are
automatic
going.
gas tax component, they say, that, well, it says right in the law it has to go to roads and bridges, but all it would take a year down the road is a quick change in the law to change that, and once again, it would be diverted for other purposes or the general fund.
They would actually have to vote on that change, though, right? 'Cause
I would say so,
to
yeah.
raise the taxes,
But
moving
gas-
forward, they don't.
Right.
But the gas tax is supposed to go for that purpose now, and it's still being diverted.
Exactly.
So
That's
that,
the
it's going to
problem.
get diverted.
That's the problem.
And diverted where? I mean, where did they spend the money?
Oh.
I have no idea.
Paul, I know we've covered a couple issues, but what if I throw this out to just a little more generically? Do you feel the state's currently going in the right direction or the wrong direction?
I would say in the wrong direction. With the current governor we have, in 8 years, he has raised the budget $9 billion, a 33% increase in the budget over 8 years. I mean, it's a tremendous increase. And it's just not a sustainable trend. I mean, how can you have the budget go up that much? I mean, people's salaries aren't going up that quick, and you have to look at where the money's going. I mean, you know, you have these little minuscule increases in local aid, yet the budget's going up billions every year. So what's it going to? You know, it's going to. We need to look into what it's going for. So
Makes sense.
I know, for instance, the Federation of Americans for Immigration Reform says Massachusetts is spending approximately $2 billion a year on services for illegals. That's a tremendous amount of money.
I would agree.
So
You think the increase in taxes and the increase in the immigration are the biggest issues facing the state? Don't let me put words in your mouth, but am I hearing you correctly?
yeah, well, we talked about the direction of the state and you know, the need to rein in spending and to, you know, maybe adjust our priorities, I would say. So
We still haven't, correct me if I'm wrong, but we still haven't gained back the jobs that we lost back when the tech bubble burst back in 2001. Correct? I don't think we've surpassed
Well,
that point in net jobs.
that's always an interesting number. I think they claim that we have, that there have been enough jobs created since the collapse that, you know, we've recovered all the jobs we lost. Actually, '07, I think, was the last, '07, '08, when we had that real plunge at the beginning of the Obama administration. But I think the more critical number that everybody never talks about is the percentage of people in the workforce. And it is the worst it's been since 1978. And I remember those days. That was horrible. It was the Jimmy Carter years, and the economy was absolutely in a depression almost. And that's, you know, that's the engagement that we have in the job market. And so regardless of what they say in the unemployment rate, and I have no idea how they configure that, you know, whether people stop looking or, you know, how
well, that's it. They
together.
take out the people who've stopped looking,
Yeah, which,
so you can make
but how
them-
do they know that? You know, just because they're off the unemployment list is probably the only way they, you know, extract that. Because I think the real unemployment number is more like 14%.
I've heard some high numbers on the actual
In that
rate,
range
yeah.
versus the 5 point whatever that, you know, they most recently put out there. So the job market still, you know, is not an attractive scenario for the kids coming out of school, and for people that are, you know, still trying to stay in the workforce. So, you know, this, and Massachusetts is in not great shape in regards to that as well.
I just talked to somebody the other day. I think their son had gotten out of school and has been looking for 2 years for a job with a good college education and hasn't found something. So.
That's scary because at
Yeah.
this point his degree is devalued.
Right.
When an employer looks at your resume and they see a gap that goes on for longer than 2 years, or if you've been out of the industry that you'd like to be in, that's a black eye, whether it's fair or not. That's a shame that people are paying what they're paying for educations, and they're coming out with not a lot to show for it. Scary.
It is.
That's true.
I've always said too that, you know, this is separate but unrelated. There's no shame in a trade. You know, it's to go out and learn a trade. That's a good thing, and I think everybody that goes to college, even people that decide they're on a college track, should go out and learn some sort of trade. It's always good to have something to
Absolutely.
fall back on.
Can't do wrong as a plumber and an electrician, right?
I have a friend that makes great money as an electrician, and another friend that's a plumber, and they work for themselves. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, a lot of risk, but you know, the reward is unlimited if you're willing to work hard, and if Beacon Hill doesn't put too many more onerous burdens on you.
That's right.
Well,
yeah.
that's part of the problem. You know, starting up a business in this state is something like two and a half times more difficult than it is, say, starting a business in North Carolina, just because of all the rules, regulations, and
Right, and how about
paperwork you have to
how
fill
about
out.
question 4? If they impose the mandatory sick time, what's that going to do to businesses
yeah.
who think about locating in Massachusetts, a small business? They're going to look at that and say, you know, this is the strictest law in the state, in the nation. Do I really want to locate in Massachusetts when I have to pay my 2 or 3 employees sick time? So
Now, I'm assuming a lot of people out there don't know exactly what's in that question yet. What is the number of days that they're insisting has to be mandatory in that bill?
it goes by hours, how many hours you have to offer per week, and I forget the
It's
exact
accrued
numbers.
time.
Right.
So what does that average out over the course of a 12-month period?
I believe it's about 6 days, maybe? Was it 5 or 6 days? I don't remember, actually.
Sounds
Yeah, I was
about
just
right from when
curious,
I read
yeah.
it. Now, one thing that's interesting, I read a study in the Boston Globe, which, take it for what that's worth, but I read a study in the Boston Globe, and it said that Connecticut has enacted a similar law that would allow for accrued sick time. But companies with fewer than 50 employees are exempt. The Massachusetts law would require someone with just 11 employees to abide by the law. Now, we're talking about small businesses like
Absolutely.
plumbers and electricians. I mean, the cost of having to pay let's say it for the sake of argument, 6 times 10 people, that's 60 days in lost
Work
lost
time.
productivity.
Yeah, productivity.
Ultimately, and it's I obviously feel bad about anyone that needs to lose a day's pay, but at the same time there's a good possibility that if such a law were enacted, the position that the person is filling would never actually have been offered in the first place. It impacts jobs. Are we in agreement there?
Definitely.
I think when it shakes out, it's a company decision. If they want to have a sick time policy, and almost every company I've ever worked for does have a sick time policy, but it's up for them to create what makes the most sense for what they're doing.
Right, I think
and it doesn't need to be dictated, from
Exactly, I
some
think
kind
that's
of
the issue.
on high, saying this is what you've got to do. And then, like in state jobs, well, by the way, when I retire, I've got accrued, 3 years worth of sick time because,
you never lose
federal,
it.
public employees just never lose it and get paid for it, which doesn't occur in the private sector.
I think I think something like 86% of businesses already offer sick time to their employees. So
Right.
it's just that, the state mandating, if it's a one-size-fits-all thing, that's not going to work for a small company compared to, a large one. You just need, I think that's the main issue, is the state mandating that you must offer it. So
The idea of a benefit is designed to attract the best possible candidate for the position. So it behooves the companies to compete with generous benefits packages to attract the best quality of employee. Now, companies are able to exploit their employees when there is limited economic growth. So when wages have stagnated, as we've seen happen over the last few years, people are not making more than they were. They're not getting consistent raises
Oh,
the way they were.
and real dollars are making less.
Right. When you
They've done
factor
it
in
with
inflation, they're making
inflation, yeah,
less,
they've
and then
already
you
done
take out,
analysis on
you
that.
raise a gas tax on us and all that good stuff. And the fact of the matter is, the employer no longer really has to compete. They can cut benefits, and the key is not placing more burden on the employer to hinder hiring and economic growth. It's to free up the economy so it can generate growth and new jobs.
that's right.
I don't understand how some of the the regressive mindedness that takes place up on Beacon Hill. I don't really understand that.
Well, it's easy. They know best.
Maybe that would be one way to look at it. Well, how has Ken voted with respect to Robert DeLeo?
Oh, it's got quite the record there. Officially 99% in agreement with the Speaker of the House in his voting record.
So you spell Ken's last name DELEO?
You could. The voting records are almost identical.
Has anyone seen that commercial yet for Scott Brown with the spelling bee? It's
Yes,
All right.
yeah.
There's a little
So
play on that one.
I did not see that. but-
Now, has he ever deviated from? I guess with 99%, he has deviated at one point or another.
I did find the one vote that he did, yes, which I have right here. It took a while to find it, but we have a 99% record. But it had to do with housing for low and moderate income residents. So in this particular vote, Robert DeLeo actually voted yes. And
Score one for Robert DeLeo.
Right. As well as Jim Dwyer from Woburn voted yes, as well as Jim Maselli from Wilmington voted yes. And the yes vote was to ensure that U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents seeking public housing benefits are not displaced by individuals illegally residing in the Commonwealth.
U.S. veterans, did you say?
This is not the
U.S.
Veterans
residents.
Bill. U.S.
No,
residents.
US
Okay.
There was another bill pertaining to veterans, but the no vote, which Ken voted, rejecting the amendment, failing to safeguard the integrity of the state's public housing program by allowing illegal immigrants to take priority over legal residents and U.S. citizens.
Priority?
Well, basically, at the federal level, you have to be a citizen.
Yeah.
So Massachusetts does not have that requirement. So this was to make the Massachusetts requirement in line with the federal requirement.
And he voted against it.
That's correct.
Scary stuff.
And even DeLeo voted for that one.
Yes.
That is scary stuff.
Yeah, the vote was 123 to 27.
How did Ken vote in the gas tax again?
He voted for it.
I guess I'm not surprised.
No, in fact, there was, I believe there was almost 3 different votes on, there was 3 different occasions to vote on that because it was part of this transportation bill. So there was actually 3 different times where they voted on that particular tax, so.
So we had 3 chances to get it right, and just like in baseball, as far as we're concerned, or as far as I would be concerned, he struck out on that one.
I would agree with that.
So
What
it's-
about the bottle bill? Has he gone on record on where he stands with that one?
I don't know if he's on record. I believe he's in favor of it, but I don't know if he's on record for that.
Okay.
Well, that hasn't come out of committee yet. So from what I was listening to on TV the other night, and this one's going to be determined by the voters themselves, or?
Question 2, I believe
Right.
it is. Right. So that's, that just doesn't make sense at all. I mean, we all have curbside recycling now, and even the current bottle bill is getting somewhat outdated. It probably made sense in the 70s and 80s, but we all have curbside recycling. You go to any ball field now, there's a thing for recycling. There's really no need to be paying a deposit on it, and to expand it to include every container that you buy at the store, it's going to raise your grocery bill another $3, $4, $5 a week. And not to mention the extra hassle if you don't bring it back. Very few people are going to want to return all that stuff. The impact on the stores.
Do you recycle?
I throw everything in the recycling bin.
It's that easy in Burlington.
What
They gave us 2 bins.
And what really bothers me about the whole concept of this particular bill is they talk about revenue to the state, obviously, because they'll generate some. But what about the productivity of the citizen that has to now supposedly go in and, if your kids drink, 2 cases of bottled water every week, that you're going to be spending
Right.
half an hour, every family in town has got to be shoving those things into the machines, and some bottles that don't even fit. I mean, is there any consideration for the citizen and the amount of, time and energy that's involved with, having to go through all that? That completely goes by the wayside. I mean, none of us want to do that
No,
stuff.
but
It's
the
not
Seems
worth it.
draconian. It
Yeah,
seems
for a
backwards.
nickel.
The stores don't want to think of the extra machines they're going to have to put in to handle all that stuff, and the extra space to handle it and store it, and I don't think anybody wants it.
I'm just thinking about the cost that the hidden costs that they never talk about.
Right.
And that part, they just kind of, blow over, well, it's good for the environment. But I mean, we've done so much already in terms of recycling and putting all these things in place that the towns have in place. And not every town has it yet, so if you really want to improve recycling, then make it mandatory that every town
Right.
sets up a secondary recycling bin as part of their pickup routine, or some structure with their dump or something to make sure that that's all in process, as opposed to, this is basically another tax, another hidden tax
is.
underneath the,
A tax and a burden
ground.
too. Just
Yeah.
returning the stuff, or if you don't choose to return it, you lose your $4 or $5 a week, whatever it ends up costing you. So it's a very bad idea, and I hope the voters will recognize that and vote against that.
yeah, and I think they will. Generally speaking, Massachusetts voters are pretty good when a tax is put in front of them. From past votes that I've seen, they pretty much vote everything down. I
Yeah.
think they feel the tax is enough. And you have an income tax, a sales tax, a property tax. Anybody ever looks at their
Excise tax.
Yeah, excise tax. You ever look at your telephone bill? There's another $20 in there that's taxes that nobody
Right.
I mean, you tax for just about every service that you get. So they have enough streams coming in to generate revenue for the state, and they just keep on finding other ways to
To spend it.
yeah.
Right.
And again, you could save $2 billion for, not spending money on people that shouldn't be here in the first place.
Right.
So what do you like to, let's lighten things up just a little bit, but what do you like to do when you're not out campaigning?
Well, I like a lot of things. I like basically anything that has to do with the outdoors. So
All right.
I like hiking. I really enjoy Mary Cummings Park in Burlington. I enjoy the landlocked forest. I enjoy the Burlington Reservoir. I mean, I enjoy all those things locally. I also like New Hampshire and Maine, and I enjoy ATVing. I like to go up to New Hampshire and Maine to do that, summer and winter, and actually all times during the year, except for mud season, of course, not allowed. But those are some of my favorite activities. So.
I heard that you're into music.
I do. I like to play guitar, right? Yeah.
All right.
In fact, I wrote and recorded the theme song for this program.
You don't say.
Very good.
So,
How old were you when you learned to play the guitar?
13.
13.
Yeah.
What's your favorite band?
My favorite band right now, I'd have to say Casting Crowns.
I'm not familiar with them.
Yeah, they're good.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good. Do you have a favorite? What's the first thing you're gonna do when the campaign's over? How do you, for fun?
Oh, probably catch up on some of the things that have been neglected the last few months. You know, I won't say it won't be as fun as going on vacation, but some things that need to be done, like you know, clean up the yard and some things that have been neglected over the summer. So
I could imagine if you're out working it in campaign and the leaves are starting to pile up.
they are.
Well, good thing. I heard you have a son that owns a landscaping business, so maybe he
I
can
do.
help you out a little bit.
Right. This is his busy time as well, so it's
Oh, yeah.
hard to get him to help.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, you don't pay them?
No.
Well, thank you for joining us
Oh,
tonight.
you're welcome.
Yeah.
It's
Good
been
luck
great.
on the
Appreciate
campaign
it.
trail.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it, and I'm sure we will be.
We look forward to having you back.
I will.
Yeah, when it's over and see how things shake out and talk a little bit about you know how it progressed.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Thanks again for coming
Okay,
in.
thanks
Take
for
care.
calling.
Have a
Okay.
great night.
Thanks.
So moving along, we'd like to delve a little bit deeper into some of these ballot questions that are going to appear and talk a little bit about the upcoming election, the governor's race, and some of the things that are going on that we're hearing about in the national news. Why don't we?
I wish we could just back up a little bit.
Sure.
Because I'm doing what I can for Paul because I feel it's so important to get a politically balanced
Yes.
legislature and people in government. The Republican Party has been missed. It has been out of the state government for a while, and I think it's sorely missed. I think we're seeing the results right now. So I'm wishing him well and hoping we can get that balance.
I mean, just look at the last 2 years. The gas tax. That's made my life more difficult than it needs to be. You know, I'm paying more at the pump, and that's on top of the federal tax. This technology tax, I can't even believe that any rep in Massachusetts or Governor Patrick would have voted for that. That is, I mean, talk about biting the hand that feeds.
Well, Governor Patrick could come he's from out of state. So,
Well, he's on his way out of state. I think he's
Back
got his
up.
eye. Who knows what he has his eye on?
Yeah, where was he originally from? Illinois?
From Illinois originally.
Yeah.
But isn't he the product of Milton
some-
Academy or something like that? I think he went to high
He
school
went to
there.
school here, yeah.
Yeah.
but someone saying they're representing this region and being for a high-tech tax, that's kind of amazing to me.
How could you be so short-sighted? How could you lack the understanding in how the local economy works?
He came from Illinois. Look at what taxes have done to that state. It's the highest tax state after California in the country.
I mean, look at
Money grows on trees until the tree dies.
Ken Gordon lives in this district, though.
He does.
Our
yes.
rep lives in this district. I mean, Ken, I got news for you. There's more businesses in Burlington than just the mall. Have you seen the Oracle software or Oracle databases as he's driving up 128? Have you seen? There's all sorts of startup companies that, these companies are just trying to turn a profit at this point. They've been given some seed capital to try and get off the ground, and you're gonna make their time at hiring more employees and growing their business more difficult. These businesses provide jobs to this district, they provide revenue to the state, and they provide revenue to this in the district that we live in, Bedford, Burlington, and Wilmington.
So what's the motivation? The motivation is if you stay in line with the speaker, then you've got a chance at getting, a committee chair and more revenue in the position that you're doing at the State House. So what's driving it more? Is it your constituents, or is it,
Ambition.
self-aggrandizement to, get a better position inside the State House? And I suspect that for most of the politicians there, that's the driving force.
I think Ken's a personable and likable guy.
I agree.
I think
I would
Ken drinks the Kool-Aid 100%, though. He is all about higher taxes, redistribution of wealth. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and the mentality is the same as in Washington. Once they,
Businesses
same
and
concept.
people are like ATMs to someone as liberal as Ken. They just don't understand that there's a limit until the system breaks. There's a tipping point. And Massachusetts is losing population. Massachusetts' economy is not growing. It's growing at a very slow, the national economy is growing at a very slow pace. Massachusetts' economy is growing at a pretty slow pace also.
Well, look at the population. Population been flat for 30 years.
Unemployment ticked up last month, I believe.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, it's not like people are rushing into Massachusetts because there's great jobs here.
There are less expensive places to live, and places like Austin, Texas have become hotbeds for technology.
Oh, that has been for a while.
It has been for a while, but it's cheaper to do business down there, and they want to say, well, Texas has really led the nation in job growth, but they want to say, well, that's all, Costco and McDonald's that's going in there, but that's not true. Good paying jobs, engineers are locating in Texas, and very intelligent people. I mean, there is a knowledge-based economy going on down in Austin, Texas.
Austin, San Antonio. When I was with Advanced Micro Devices years ago, we moved all our plants out of Sunnyvale and moved them all to Texas because of the cost structure.
128 in Silicon Valley was the capital and the two ends of the spectrum in the United States for that business, and they're still powerful segments. But I mean, I just don't understand biting the hand that feeds like that. It seems a little ridiculous to me.
Oh yeah, well, companies are moving overseas because it's more cost effective, or they're moving out of the high price states to lower cost states when it comes to manufacturing issues. Both Silicon Valley and Boston will always remain somewhat technological centers just because of the educational environments that are in both areas. You got Stanford and UC Berkeley and Caltech, and you've got MIT and Northeastern and Harvard here, so as well as surrounding great institutions. So you've always got that base. But the problem is you educate them and then they leave.
That's
they don't stay here to build companies because it's not that friendly an environment, and I think that is completely missed by politicians on Beacon Hill. They give lip service to it, and that's about it. So, hopefully, with a change from the top down, with a little luck in this current election, we might get, a group of people that will, bring policies in play that are more friendly to allowing our economy to grow. Because once your economy grows, that takes care of everything else. You do end up generating more revenue. I'll go back to Reagan's days, when, you cut taxes, revenue grew, and, you're able to support a lot more programs and also keep your debt under control. But, if you keep too much of a burden in play, companies are going to move to other places, your tax base isn't going to grow, and you're going to remain stagnant. And then your only solution is to raise income taxes, and, then it becomes a defeating circle of, a downward spiral.
Yeah.
And you need to get out of that spin cycle, and that's basically what's going on in Washington too. It's it's like a copycat, scenario from what they're doing down there to what's going on in Beacon Hill here, and you can see that in almost all the blue states. They're not growing their population, they're not growing their economies, and
how's Detroit doing?
Yeah, really. How's Chicago doing?
Not too good either. Good point.
Probably the most liberal city. People don't realize this, but it's probably one of the most liberal cities in the in the country, and they're not too far behind Detroit.
Yeah.
Going down that path to bankruptcy. So a lot of states in the Northeast and the North are in real trouble. And, you can't tax your way out of it.
I agree.
You can grow your way out of it, but that takes courage. And
I agree.
the only person I saw had that kind of courage was the governor of Minnesota, Walker. And, that state is turning itself around. They've got a surplus in the budget now, and they're able to do some things that they weren't able to do a couple of years ago. There's a little pain to be shared, but you got to bite the bullet a little bit at some point so that you can, get the train turned around.
I agree. We ready to move on to the ballot questions?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So ballot question. I just want to explain. So in the upcoming election, when we go to vote for governor, when we go to vote for hopefully a new state rep, there are going to be, in addition to all the constitutional offices on the ballot in the congressional race, there are 4 questions on the ballot. On all questions, voting yes equates to changing an existing law. So the first question 1, is the gas tax. Voting yes on the gas tax means you're going to change the law. Do you gentlemen know if that means rolling back the gas tax?
It means rolling back the automatic increases to the gas tax. Let's get
Correct.
Get accurate here.
Well, no, I'm just
Yeah.
I'm asking that rhetorically for our
Right.
viewers.
It doesn't roll back the gas tax itself, just the automatic increases, but yes.
So yes, voting yes does not eliminate the gas tax. In fact, when it was raised last year, it doesn't even roll back the gas tax. What it means is you will not, next time our legislators want to increase the gas tax, they need to take an up or down vote. It just is not, it's not just indexed to
CPI.
inflation.
To CPI is what they did.
Correct. Do any of you guys want to weigh in as to where how you're going to vote on that one?
I think it should be automatic that anytime you have a tax, it should be discussed, and they should have a vote on it. There should never be a tax that's automatic.
I think that's fair. I also think that
It's my money that they're taking.
Correct. I
your
definitely
money.
think that every legislator, regardless of party, that votes, every change, especially a tax increase, needs to go before an up or down vote, because I think it's fair that every 2 years when we go through this exercise and vote on a new state rep, for example, or a new governor, there should be a record there that people can cite, that it's clear. There's a forensic trail.
Well, that's why they did it. It's no different than what they did with their pay raises. They did that in, the last hour, middle of the night, some years ago, and then they tied their raises, into automatic increases.
Again,
so that they would
lack
never,
of transparency.
so they never would have to vote on it again, so that you couldn't look at their record and say, this guy is taking advantage of our money by, not having to vote for it and us have a say in it.
I think a gas tax is a really regressive way to tax someone, that it goes after people that I enjoy working, and I go to my job out of necessity, and to raise the cost of having to go to my job, and and truth be told, I have a pretty good life. I'm solidly in the middle class, but there are people that are down and out, and this tax could raise the cost of goods and services. You're paying someone to the guy that comes to bring the oil to your home.
Yeah,
the cost of running their fleet goes up.
Yeah, but if you don't have roads, if you don't have bridges, if you don't have tunnels, you don't get to your job.
Need infrastructure, yes.
Infrastructure is always something that is constantly going to be improved, and obviously it costs quite a bit of money. So, having a defined, tax in place, to bear the cost of that, I don't mind. But the current gas tax doesn't even do that. They take that money, goes in the general fund, and they're not applying all those funds to our infrastructure, quote unquote. And, is this going to be any much of a different scenario when it goes in the general fund, and how much of that is going to get peeled back?
A lack of accountability and transparency.
So until we do something like, every time we write a bill and we have a lockbox saying, okay, we're writing a bill, this money is going to be earmarked for this, and they can't touch it, then maybe people would be a little bit more comfortable if we really think that that's the kind of revenue stream they need to keep that supported. But it's no different than a lottery. That lottery was going to be guaranteed to the cities and towns for God knows how long, and the revenue coming to the cities and towns has been going down for a decade. I think there's a slight. I think there's a slight improvement, but again, the money goes in the general fund and is diverted elsewhere. And we'll get into the conversation on the bottle bill, but again, a similar scenario where the money will go into the general fund, and even though the law dictates it'll go to environmental concerns, that may happen for a year or two, but then the money will get, transferred somewhere else, because we do a good job of recycling in this state to begin with. And there are other ways of addressing the problem without an underground tax, which this essentially is.
Okay, yeah, so let's transition. Oh, did you want to add something?
Well, yeah, how many bills have been sold that, this money, this new revenue is going to go back to the cities and towns? That's the way they're selling almost everything.
Campaigned on that.
Or, yes, or it's
That
going
was
to
a big
go
bait
to
and
this
switch.
fund, yeah. So when you hear that, you know it's going to go into, they just mean general fund, because they decide each year how they want to spend it. And
Agreed.
we're allowing them to do so.
And our budget for the state that they passed is $36 billion. Does anybody have any idea where all that money goes?
No idea. In fact,
Social services,
I
to some
believe there was a
degree,
budget
but-
surplus. In lieu of this tax increase, they ended the year with a budget surplus. So I don't really understand why there was a necessity for an increase in taxes to begin with, when there ended up being more revenue coming in than they had planned on in the first place. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then you find out that, I believe something like $50 million, which in the grand scheme of things isn't a ton, but I believe that the gas tax added was slated to add $800 million in new revenue. They ended up having a $600 million revenue surplus, and I believe that it's estimated that $50 million has gone to EBT abuse, abusing the EBT system.
Oh, I bet it's more than that.
That's what the estimate has come from. I'm not sure which group compiled that statistic, but the bottom line is, between the revenue surplus and the reforming EBT, that just negated the whole point of the tax increase to begin with. You got to work smarter, not harder.
And we're not
That's
just
true.
paying the gas tax. It's not like we don't spend money to the DMV every year.
Correct. Every year the
that's
fees
supposed
go
to
up.
go to that. You're talking about licensing fees and registration fees and God knows what other fees that they collect all day long. So, and that place is always busy every time I'm over there. So I'm sure that that revenue stream is pretty sound.
So our roads and bridges, we would agree, should be in pretty good shape.
They should be in excellent
They
shape.
should.
so,
They're not. I
you know.
still drive over. I've been driving over the same pothole on my way down Route 93 for the last 10 years now. But it gets filled in, and then the next winter it's crumbled again. But I guess we should move on to the next issue because
Sure.
we are working with a limited time period here. So question 2, we did allude to that a little bit. Expanding the bottle bill to include, right now it's soda and beer. Moving forward, some of the powers that be would like to include water and sports drinks.
Everything.
Everything, anything
thought
that comes in a bottle.
I thought pretty much.
Which, my reasoning against it, you know what? Fewer people are drinking soda. People's diets are changing, people's diets are improving, more people are drinking water. I know I don't touch soda anymore, personally. I do still buy water. They can bleed me that way. But the truth of the matter is, are they doing this for revenue? That's really why they're doing this. Originally, it was sold to us as back in the 80s, that this was a measure to improve the environment. Well, I recycle all the time. It's, they give us 2 barrels in Burlington. One's really easy. If you can't figure it out, the blue one is for the trash, and green goes towards, saving the environment and recycling. So it's a redundancy.
And they've made it simpler with a single stream recycling,
Yeah.
where we used to have to separate out.
Yeah.
So it's become very easy. We have a good system. It's not time for the
So
state.
easy I can do it.
Not easy for this. It's not a good time for the state to step in and say, well, let's take something that's working well and change it all.
This is a money grab.
Yeah, and the only question I have is, does every town in the state have something similar to what we have? I mean, I think all of our local communities do, but
I've heard differing numbers. I've heard anywhere from 64 to 90% of the state has curbside recycling. So I've heard on the low end 64%, on the high end 90%.
So the question is, whatever that number is, then it's up to the state and the towns to get in line with all the other cities and towns that have that system in place.
I would agree.
And then our recycling issues, drop down to 2 or 3%. People that throw them over the shoulder and stuff, at their park and stuff, which is irresponsible, and you can't control that aspect of it. But the balance of the concept of recycling is simplified, and
The fact that we
the
have
state doesn't want to do it because obviously, again, it's a revenue.
the fact that we
it's a
have
revenue.
curbside recycling now has created a whole new industry for them to tax, that creates jobs because there's people that drive that truck that pulls up at my house and takes the recyclables away. And, with that, there's income taxes that they get to tax. I mean, there's stuff that you get to tax. You still get to tax. But, it's a redundancy at this point. You're making people, people's lives are busy. People got to go to work. They got to, they got to go to the grocery store. They got to go to the cleaners. They got to pick the kids up from daycare. They got things to do.
Well, the thing is,
Nobody's running-
but the thing is, the motivation is for the environment.
If that's the
And
motivation.
if that's the motivation, then we have a system in place to deal with it. So
I don't
it's,
think the true motivation is the environment.
well, but I mean, that's the argument.
Yeah.
So if that's the argument, then expand on the system that we currently have and make it more efficient. not to throw in another, hidden tax on the population.
Agreed.
And I think the tax is only minor. How many of us are really going to go in there and shove 30, 40, 50 bottles into a machine every weekend? I know
Absolutely
I'm
never.
not. I'm not. They're going to go in the recycle bin like they always have. I don't have the time for that.
So Tom, I'm not sure how the question is worded, but if we want to keep the current system, how do we need to vote?
If you want to keep the current system, yes equates to changing an existing law.
There is no law in this.
The recycling's mandatory. We do have mandatory recycling.
But I mean, I'm talking about the bottle bill law that is going to force us to, there's going to be like water bottles and everything
So
else will have
ultimately,
the 5 cents on it.
if you
But
want
that
no
law
change-
that law doesn't exist in the legislature yet.
If you want no change to the system, or if you don't want to change the way things are, you vote no, and that will not then, provided that the legislature doesn't tell us
Too bad.
we know better,
Okay.
they will. You won't see an added tax on water, and not to mention that 5 cents that you're going to now pay in water, that also raises the cost of handling at the wholesaler end.
Well, not only that, but they want to get rid of the 5 cents. I mean, the next step after
They
getting
wanna
all
double
this
it.
covered is they want to raise it to 10 and
Yes.
downstream raise it to 15. So the burden then becomes even more substantial.
This is the camel's nose under the tent. You
You
wake
know.
up the next day and the camel's all the way in the tent.
So no on question 2 is a consensus then.
I'm going no on question 2. I'm going no on question 2.
It's a small sample size, but
This is not a scientific poll by any measure. Moving along. Question 3, the casinos. I have the feeling we might have differing opinions here on this panel.
Possibly.
I think that, so voting yes on the casinos will completely dissolve the way that the casino law was written. Right now, there's four gambling facilities allowed in Massachusetts. One being a slot parlor in Raynham or Taunton, I believe. There's one that was approved in Everett, and there's one that was approved in Springfield at this point.
and they're talking about one down in Bedford, aren't they?
That's
Or it's
still
that
up
area,
in
but
the
up
air. That's kind of been like a hot potato because I know a lot of it was voted. I think Middlebury or
Middleborough.
Middleborough
Middleborough,
voted
Vermont.
Middleborough voted not to allow the casino in their town.
Right.
Now, granted, Everett and Springfield have opted that they want a casino there.
Well, if they try to get in Foxborough, Kraft tried to get it down there, and they voted against
And
it too.
I-
So
yes.
you've got to get the town to first,
that was shot
agree
down by
to
the
it.
Selectmen, Board of Selectmen, I believe.
It never
in
got to
Foxborough.
it never got to a town vote.
I don't think it did.
Oh, okay, but I mean, the town opted not. That was a big political football a couple of years ago.
I think, my personal opinion, I'm going to go yes on this one. I'm going to vote to get rid of the casinos. I like the idea of new revenue, and I'm fine with the idea of creating. I actually think, in theory, the casinos aren't a bad idea. I think a place like Springfield that's lost a lot of its manufacturing sector, I know those casino dealers or the table dealers, they get paid like $60,000 a year, I've heard. I believe there's a possibility for within the casino for, some chefs to create restaurants, entertainment destinations. I've gone to Foxwoods and the MGM Grand. I don't gamble, but I'll go down there and I'll go out to eat. We'll make a night of it. We'll people watch. We'll have a couple of drinks. It's a good night out.
They have great shows.
Great
It's
shows.
Great entertainment. I mean, I'm for it. I think the casino in Everett would be a positive for the area.
That's what. Well, one, I think the whole way that it was done. There's from what I'm understanding, there's some corruption involved with this, some nefarious characters involved in the Everett casino. My biggest issue with it is, I think, from a traffic standpoint, I just can't reconcile with how that area is going to be able to absorb an influx of cars. I'm having a tough time buying that one. I don't know how they're going to revitalize that area, and it's going to look like that pretty little diagram that they keep showing on the news. I'm not buying it.
Well, I see, it's easy access from Boston. You've got the subway, system that goes right up into that area because it's right by the racetracks. Obviously, they'll probably do some enhanced improvements on 1A, which is the road that goes up and down in that area.
So that's a nightmare in the morning if you've ever traveled down that in the morning.
What isn't a nightmare in the morning?
Touche.
So to me, I think Everett's a pretty depressed area. I think it'll help revitalize it to some degree, and
I agree with that out in Springfield. I
I
don't
don't
think
really-
you can mess up Springfield
I don't-
much worse than it's already
I
messed
don't
up.
really have much of
Springfield
an issue
for a
there.
little while, and yeah,
you agree or
it
disagree?
would need something like that, like a casino.
I don't think it's a bad idea in theory. I just think I mean a slot parlor in Raynham, that just sounds kind of sketchy. That just sounds really seedy. I don't know.
Well,
The other jobs that
By the way, I'm not a gambler either. I don't gamble, but I still think it. I think it helps the area for a couple of reasons. It'll stay open later. It'll allow Boston's convention center that's almost empty all the time, and I've been to my share
Yeah.
of conventions down there. That they'll be able to draw conventions into this city that they have not been able to draw before, because
Why
people
couldn't they
will
put it
then
in
go
South
out.
Boston then?
Because Boston voted down.
I just think
So
I
ever,
think
so ever was the next best choice. It's, I'm sure that there'll be some kind of, commuter rail transportation out there. They'll keep it open until 2 at night. And, I think it enhances Boston's overall desire as a destination city. And I think the benefits outweigh the negatives as far as if traffic's the one concern that you have.
my theory is I would like to see them still locate a casino in. I'd rather just have them blow it up and start all over from scratch, to tell you the truth.
Geez, they've been working on this for how long?
I understand, and in the counter argument, I had a tough time coming to my decision on this one because I am a fan of a predictable business climate in Massachusetts, and my voting yes on this is contrary to where I stand usually. However, again, I just think it's a poorly written law and it's been poorly rolled out, and it could just be done. I think one or two would have been fair. They didn't need to put one, okay, this zone gets one, that zone gets one, a slot parlor two. I mean, I think it was a poorly written law. Both candidates for governor have pretty much made it clear that whether I like this or not, regardless of how we vote, they're going to move ahead with the one out in Springfield. And, I usually don't like when they override. Again, I don't like that government knows better, whether it's Charlie Baker or Martha Coakley. I don't like that. But I'm reading the tea leaves, and I think just blowing it up and starting over again and making Springfield the destination and seeing what comes out of it from there is.
I think it's going to be a little difficult to blow it up at this point because it's been in the works for so long.
I agree.
And I think, hearing that you visited Foxwoods, okay, that's out of state, by the way.
Hey, you're right, you're correct.
I'd like to see that. I'd like to see it stay here.
Springfield's even farther.
But it's in the state. I mean, it's ultimately the revenue stays here, and hopefully we can track people from other areas. We got to keep.
And
Final thought.
If we're overbuilding casinos, that's going to take care of itself. People just won't be able to, support 4 casinos if there's not that much interest
Yeah,
in
so
it.
if you have
If
one
it's
and
too
do
much,
it right and actually provide people with jobs that are, instead of people going to some job that they're just sitting there staring, waiting for people to walk through the door.
Well, I think it's a net benefit myself. I think it'll help Boston become a destination city. People like coming to the city to begin with, but for that group that wants to, enjoy some nightlife, that's the downside of Boston. It's a city that also shuts down pretty early. So
I'm in the minority on this one. I guess just in the interest, can we do a rapid lightning round on question 4? We got 2 minutes to go.
right.
well, just if you want to keep the casino bill, then it's then you
Question
vote
4.
yes. Okay,
All right. Yes, you're correct.
Yes.
You want to keep the casino?
as is. You vote yes.
No.
No, you vote no.
You want to vote no. And I'm not trying to trick people because I'm for voting yes, but it's,
I'm gonna wait till I get the questions and read.
yeah,
it
yeah.
again.
Just wait for the mail, but I'm pretty sure it's voting yes. It's vote yes to get rid of the casinos, to change the law. Like I said before, if you want to change the law, vote yes. All right, we got to move along here. Question 4. We already alluded to it slightly.
What, the sick time?
The sick time?
I just think it's a mistake for.
I think it's going to inhibit hiring.
Well, I just think any regulation that the state, adds to the business community is a mistake for the most part, unless it's really well thought out. And as usual, this one isn't. So, companies are going to make, generally speaking, the best decision for their employees and for their own, well-being.
If I could add, the state cannot make a better decision than the individual entrepreneurs and
exactly.
business owners, because it's their business, their employees. They want to keep good employees. And so if they need to have one, again, it's so industry specific too. Each industry acts differently in regards to sick time.
If they're going to survive and do well,
I prefer to
then
leave it in the hands of the different industries and businesses.
Quick prediction. Do you want to do a prediction on who wins the governor's race?
I think it looks very good for Charlie Baker.
I agree. At this point, it's looking pretty good for him. If
Yeah.
they're still neck and neck at this point, and people haven't made a decision on Coakley in the amount of time that we've gotten to know Martha Coakley, I just want to remind everyone we really didn't get into this, but there, I believe every constitutional office on the ballot is contested, from treasurer, and we've had many of these candidates on the program, I'm happy to say, from both sides. We've had Democrats and Republicans.
And independents, too.
And independents, who were governor's council candidates. One last shameless plug.
The pumpkin patch.
This Saturday and throughout the month of October, the Burlington Pumpkin Patch, located at St. Mark's Church. Proceeds go to the food pantry. My beautiful face will be there on Saturday. Please join me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
I think we're done.